Hi, it's Gary with Successful Gardens, and today we're going to be doing a twist on fairy gardens. My wife, she likes fairies, but she also likes gnomes. If any, those little short garden gnomes, the legends of European gardens. So I thought, what if we made a gnome garden? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a gnome garden. And yes, I went shopping at the greenhouse and brought home a lot of plants. I have potting soil. I have a large bowl that we're going to plant in. And so let's get going. All right, so what do we need to do? In my little workstation, see, I've got my tomatoes and my peppers growing over here. So I'm reduced to a smaller area of what I can plant and work in. And I have all of the potential possibilities of what we could use in a fairy garden. I have a whole bunch of flowers and perennials that I got from the greenhouse. And then I also have the potting soil. Now I've taken the potting soil and I've put it in this large tote bin. That's just like what I like to keep my potting soil in, and I've pre-moistened it. So I've added water to it, and then of course I have this large bowl. I'm using a bowl that's about 18 inches wide, 9 inches deep. It does have a plug in the bottom of it, so I want to make sure that I take that plug, pop that plug right out, and so that water will drain through. That's important. So now that I have the drain hole in the bottom of the planter, it's time that I just go ahead and add the potting soil and we start working on creating our gnome garden. Now with these plants that I'll be using, as they sit in the pot, there's a lot of dirt already in those pots, so I'm not going to fill the container full yet, but I still want to get that base of potting soil to work with the plants. And so let's add about 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches of potting soil to this plant. In this particular garden, I'm going to have some cute little garden gnome accessories. I have this little gnome house. I have a gnome riding a turtle. A little tiny gnome that has flowers. Whether he picked a flower out of the pot or not, that's yet to be determined. And then, of course, I have another cute little gnome on top of a mushroom. So I'll strategically have to place these when I'm working with the plants and remember the spacing for these gnomes. Okay, we have the potting soil as the base. And then we got to think of plants that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and just temporarily place this house in this garden. And of the plants that I have picked out, there are many of them are perennials. And the idea that I did with perennials is that I could disassemble some of this. If I didn't want to leave it on the tabletop, I could disassemble and plant some of the perennials out in my garden when the weather gets nicer. But for some height and texture, I got a red rooster grass. This will add some height and some texture to the plant. I have different types of sempervirens, or hen and chicks as they're called. You can see the color differences in these. We got some green base with red tips, and we have red leaves with green tips. I really love the color contrast to this particular hen and chick variety. Now, with these perennials, they are perfect for planting out in the garden. You'll just have to be mindful of where you plant them. Sometimes they require shaded areas. Some will require full sun, and so you want to be careful of make sure that when you plant those, you'll get to know where those perennials go. Now, for another height and variance in texture of the plant, I picked, this is a Juga. This particular one is black scallop. You can see the dark purple or brown leaves on this. This is a perennial that grows in the shade, but I like the height of this flower that is coming into bloom. And there again, that will work, giving some height and different textures in this particular garden. Now, to add a little extra color, this is a creeping phlox. It is an early spring bloomer. Now, this is a sedum. This is dragon's blood. So with gnomes, this might work, but I saw this and I thought, oh, dragon's blood, sedum, and actual dragons, that might be a fun tabletop garden to work on next. One other possibility is this thyme. This is a creeping thyme. It's very, very small, dainty. It would fill the front of a tabletop garden very easily. And there again, with placement of gnome, it's not going to overpower the gnomes, but it will give a nice grassy texture to the garden. So this is a good possibility to also use. Of course, there are mosses. There's Scotch moss and Irish moss. Can you tell the difference? Scotch moss is actually has a yellow hue to it, and the Irish moss you would suspect would be greener, and it truly is. Now, these will spread. These would make nice textures for a forest floor for a garden gnome. So there's a possibility of using the mosses. Now, if you want another sedum that would work, this is called Angelina. It reminds me of small pine shrubs or juniper bushes, if you would, in a tabletop garden. Now, one other perennial. This is actually one of my favorite perennials. It's a collection of perennials that come in various shades of colors, ranging from yellows, they have silvers, they have dark purples. This happens to be Color Dream. It's a purplish, reddish purple, beautiful red undertones of the leaf. But these flower tendrils are getting ready to bloom, and they're going to be a dainty pink to softer cream colors also in its bloom. And that would, in comparison, you can see the height that it would give to this house. And so that is one perennial that I do want to use in this garden. With this house, we're going to want it in the back. In landscaping, I don't necessarily like to put a frame or put a goalpost around a house, so I'm going to stick these two red rooster grasses over to the side. This would make a fun focal point up front with the ajuga. The coral bells or the heuchera would look nice to the side, and it would give when the flower tendrils come into bloom, it would offer some height in the background also. Well, let's see, we've got the creeping phlox. That would be nice almost to the front. I don't know if we're going to be able to get the moss in or not, but we ought to have a nosy. No, I want to put the hen and chicks in. That's going to be a nice front focal the wool, or the thyme would be a flat lawn, if you will. Let's go for a flat lawn in front of the house. We've got the color here, and we could throw in the Angelina. No, I want to keep Angelina out. I want to put that sedum in there. I really, really like this hen and chicks right here. And so I think we'll use it as an offset here in the back. And if I've got room, when we get this up and planted up higher, if I've got room in the back, I still could plant the other hen and chicks variety, or I could go with the moss or the Angelina in the back. And now we're going to plant. I could add the mosses, but I might cheat. At the craft store, there is what is this is just called forest moss. You can use this in terrariums. It's safe for terrariums. It's moss that's been harvested out of the forest. Ideally, you would want to wet this up. So, okay, there it's just adding just a touch of solid green to this garden. Maybe I will add a little more up into here. Now, one thing about this moss also, what it will also do, rather than just acting as a green grass, green lawn, it will also act as a moisture barrier in helping keep moistures in, depending on how much you use in your little tabletop garden. All right, let's add Mr. Big Gnome. We got the little flower gnome guy. Ooh, put a little dirt on him. He's going to sit right up against the house there. I might add a little height to him and put him on top of a pot there. Let's see what that does. And then the gnome on the mushroom. And we'll just go ahead and put him right up front and center. Where do we put him? No, he needs to be up front and center. All right, there we go. We've got that. Now, I've got another little hole back here. I might just add a little more of this moss. Rather than planting the moss, I'll just cheat and add this craft moss, or this forest moss, to the garden. And all right, okay, now we have it. During the daytime temperatures, this can perfectly go outside with no problems. But as with perennials, as you acclimate them to the outside temperatures, you could actually leave this pot out on your patio for everyone to enjoy outside after a few nights. But be very careful of, if you still are experiencing freezing temperatures, you would want to make sure that you remember to bring it in if it started to get too cold. All right, let's take a final look at this up front. Not bad looking. That's nice and fun. As you can see, the individual colors and flowers in this gnome garden from different sides. It's nice and full and fun. Well, that was fun. I had fun building that gnome garden, tabletop garden, especially this time of year when I can do a lot outside. There's a lot of prep work that I got to do outside to get it ready for the spring, but it's still just cold enough at night, still freezing often enough that I have to be careful of what I plant. But by building this tabletop garden, I was able to get my hands dirty, play in the dirt, and actually create something that I can use and enjoy all summer long. In fact, if you have a bright sunny sunroom, you could actually bring your tabletop gardens inside and enjoy them over the winter months. The key factor is just having enough light for those gardens. Now, what type of tabletop gardens do you have? Do you plant the traditional fairy gardens? Have you added water, a little water feature to it? Do you like gnomes? Have you ever thought about making a gnome garden? I mentioned a dragon garden that I need to work on and a lighthouse theme. Do you want to do a Noah's Ark with your kids or your grandkids? That would be something fun. When you think of tabletop gardens, the possibilities are limitless. You just have to use your imagination. Thanks for letting me share my imagination with you in this gnome garden. Until next time, this is Gary with Successful Gardens, and remember, let's get growing.